Welcome back to Kaleidoscope. I am here with George, the author of the TinMen blog, to talk about men's and women's rights and well-being with a real focus on the issues that are affecting men in society. And before we go any further, if anything we've talked about so far has raised any issues for you, please call Beyond Blue or Lifeline. Check out the websites. If you need any help at all or you're feeling insecure, give them a call, check out the websites, and they will absolutely help. Now, George, what I want to talk to you about is women's prisons. You pointed out something interesting on Instagram. As you know, there's a big conversation in society about allowing trans women into women's prisons. So that we're talking about male people who are identifying as women being allowed into women's prisons. And there's a big kerfuffle about that because there have been instances where these male inmates have raped and impregnated, in some cases, female inmates. But you referenced this issue, but pointed out that the rates of sexual assault of female inmates by other female inmates is even higher than male-on-male sexual assaults in male prisons. Now, I didn't know that. I was very, very surprised. Can you elaborate on that for us?
Well, that's a great example of the reality of data going against a popular narrative of violence. So yes, there's a lot of conversation about people like Isla Bryson wanting to go into women's prisons, and obviously a massive outrage about a male rapist wanting to be in these spaces. But although I understand that it is outrageous and it has exposed sort of ideological blind spots in the political system, it is still only a tiny, tiny portion of the problem. And I feel like we need to be talking about, if you were interested in safeguarding women's prisons, you need to be talking about the entire population about prison. And it's frustrating how in prison we just throw people in. We just throw people with addiction problems and mental health problems. We have traumatized people and predatory people, including women. And we mix them together without any sort of interest. Like often we mix actual gangs together in prison who are extremely violent, and we say nothing. And then the moment one so-called trans woman tries to go into prison, and finally the world erupts. And I'm like, where was your outrage for all of the other sexual assaults? And you're absolutely right that there are higher rates of sexual assault in women's prisons between women than there are in male prisons between men, and not even by a small amount, about 2 or 3 times more. And it just shows that we are not willing to see violence by women. Unless that woman is a man wearing a wig and pink leggings. And and I find the conversation around people like Isla Bryson to be a little bit disingenuous, because it doesn't seem to be about prison safeguarding. And if it was, those people would have been talking about it a lot earlier and a lot more broadly.
That is, I was looking at your Instagram and I was absolutely floored. I went, what? Because I've spoken before on the issue of male-on-male rape in male prisons. I've said what a terrible scourge that is, and it's dreadful that it's never talked about. The issue of the female-on-female inmates, I don't think most people can get their heads around that. Can you?
No, I mean, it should be said that in absolute numbers, the amount of sexual assault in men's prisons is significantly higher. You're talking about 900,000 cases just in America alone, and if you actually factor that into all rape cases in America, men are actually the #1 victim of rape if you include prison rape. Yeah. So I'm talking about as a percentage of the population, it's higher, but in absolute numbers, it's higher for men.
So, George, you've also pointed out another fact that a lot of people probably wouldn't occur to them, is that boys are more likely to be victims of modern slavery and sextortion. Can you tell us a bit about that?
So two separate issues there. Modern slavery, there's a push in the UK, for example, to expand the definition of modern slavery to include people that are criminally exploited, such as through gangs. Overwhelmingly, it's about 90% men, and young boys especially, that are brought into gangs and exploited. And in that widened view of modern slavery, men and especially young boys are the #1 victim of modern slavery in the UK today. Sextortion is a new and emerging problem of which boys are also the primary target, and that's where boys are often targeted on social media by fake people, both men and women, pretending to be women. It's not actually women doing it necessarily, and they're basically encouraged to send nude photos of themselves, and then those photos are then used to blackmail that boy into sending money over. And it's led to suicides, like dozens of suicides in America last year, and no one seems to be talking about it. And the thing is, because just like domestic violence, the conversation around sort of online exploitation and sexual exploitation is often targeted at young girls, and young girls are learning a lot about not to send certain photos, but boys are not the target of such useful messages, and they're doing it more willingly. And that's what's so dangerous about sextortion. That unlike other scams, where it takes many months for the scammer to build up a relationship with the target, sextortion with boys take hours. There's stories of like a boy leaving his girlfriend's house, and then in just that night he would connect with a scammer, send a photo, be exploited, and kill himself in one night, just in the space of a few hours. So it happens really fast, and because we're so unaware of it, parents aren't safeguarding their boys. And I mean, if you get one thing from this interview, I'm like, please talk to your boys, if you have a boy, about not sending certain photos to strangers online, because it can and does end in suicides.
Oh
And
my
it's tragic.
gosh. That's a real good point then, actually. There is definitely an education gap, there must be, between boys and girls when it comes to what you should and shouldn't send to people online. You're right, girls get pushed all the time. You know, don't send nude photos, don't send explicit images, but no one says that to boys. So of course they're not going to be as aware, particularly when they're young, of the dangers associated with that. So yes, parents, please talk to your boys, tell them this stuff. Again, there's so much about men and boys and the things that they suffer that people just don't know about. And one conversation that very rarely happens is the talk of men's reproductive rights. We hear a lot about women's reproductive rights, but nothing about men's. It's like they don't have any. And I want to show an image of another thing you posted on Instagram. If we could get that up on the screen now. This is a nifty little device called the Impregnator. Which is a legitimate thing. We found the website. It's exactly as it looks. It's an implement for inserting semen into the vagina. But as you can see the caption there, steal his sperm and force him into fatherhood. So George, there seems to be an advent then of women, is there, literally like stealing their partner's sperm and inseminating them against their partner's will. Is that correct?
There is, I mean, 1 in 10 men in America have had a partner try to get pregnant when they did not want them to. I can't imagine many, if any of them, are at the hands of such a crazy contraption as this. So I try to use this contraption as a means of having a wider conversation about men's reproductive rights and reminding people of a lot of men are forced into becoming a father against their will. And that's an important issue too. The Impregnator it's on sale now. I think it's like 50% off. And it's a device it's a device that supposedly allows you to a woman to take a man's condom that he's disposed in the bin, and she can allegedly take sperm out of the condom and use it to impregnate herself. I mean, everyone's heard the story of Drake putting chili sauce in his condom, and a woman did exactly that, and she tried to use that, and then she basically used your imagination, and the rest is history. So it is like there are lots of people that experience reproductive control by women, not necessarily in such humorous ways. And it's an important point to talk about. And it's amazing how those are ads as well. Like that product you're talking was part of a paid ad campaign on X. And I'm like, that's not an appropriate thing to be advertising.
No.
And it's an important vessel to talk about the wider issue.
Well, exactly. See, there's all this talk about a women's choice, a woman's right to choose, and bodily autonomy for women when it comes to reproduction. And to an extent, that's understandable because women are the ones that we're the vessels, we carry the babies. But men do 50%. Men are 50% of the deal when it comes to actual reproduction. And there's no talk about forced fatherhood or if a woman gets pregnant, on a one-night stand, knocks on his door a year later and says, "Hey, I've got a baby, it's yours, please pay me child support." Why do we not hear more about men's reproductive rights?
It gets even worse than that. There are men that have been raped and then forced into child support by women. And there's boys that have been raped by women. There's a boy who was about 14, raped by his babysitter. When he was an adult, he got served about $20,000 worth of child support payments. And the court held it up. And they were like, what she did was a crime, but this is a civil court, that's a criminal court, and those two don't actually interact with each other. So he actually was compelled to pay child support for a baby as a result of him being raped by an adult. So it's a serious problem. And the point is that men can't opt out of being a parent after pregnancy, unlike women. And that often leads to men being forced into fatherhood when they don't want to or not ready, and they become sort of resentful dads. And it's frustrating that we talk a lot about deadbeat dads and absent parents. And we never really think about maybe that dad never wanted to be a parent. Maybe he was made a parent against his will. And It's a shame. And it also ignores the fact that women are more likely to avoid paying child custody than men as a percentage. But I feel like we need to be more mindful of men's choice and understanding that a man's choice to be a parent or not ends at conception, whereas a woman's doesn't. And I'm pro-choice for women, and I'm like, why can we not have pro-choice for men? Should men be able to opt out of having a child if he tells the woman early in the pregnancy? And I think that's a fair point. As Karen DeCrow put it, who was a feminist, ironically, she said a man should not have to finance a woman's choice. And like a woman making a unilateral decision should not expect a man to finance that choice. And I'm like, that's a fair thing. That's what autonomy is. Like, rights come with responsibility, and you have to take responsibility for your choices.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think I tend to be more on the pro-life side of things, but I think in a world where we do have abortion and we do have, a woman's right to choose and all of that, well, if that is the framework in which we're working and women are able to opt out, then why is there no conversation about men opting out as well? I mean, that's not equality at all.
Yeah. Well, you may not agree with the pro-choice sentiment, but at least you can acknowledge it's one-sided and hypocritical.
Absolutely. Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I'm completely with you on that. It's men have no reproductive rights, and it's completely unfair because they're 50% of the bargain. Now, look, oh no, go ahead.
I was going to say, well, that's a great example of how talking about men and boys helps everyone. Like, if we look at a lot of the criminal behaviour in young adolescent boys, they often come from fatherless homes. They come from the homes in which we're talking about. So giving men a chance to opt into fatherhood will more often create happy and healthy children who are less likely to go on to commit these crimes. And like, again, the link between fatherlessness at home and adolescent crime is massive, and really important to have fathers at home with boys especially. And I feel like giving men that choice will help solve that problem.
Yeah, I think you raised some excellent points. We need to be nurturing our men and our boys as they go through life in the same way that women are, because in order to have a functional society, everyone needs to be functional and needs the resources to do that, and it simply doesn't exist for men and boys the same way it does for women and girls. Now, George, we're out of time, and I'm so unfortunate we are, because this has been such an interesting, profound conversation. Just before we go, please tell everyone where can they find you online and find more information like this from you?
Yeah, you can find me on Instagram mainly at the TinMen, all one word. And like these conversations and many more besides are happening there. There's so much to talk about. This is just the tip of the iceberg, really. And it's very interesting. No one else is having these conversations, really. So they are mostly happening on my page at the TinMen.
Fantastic.
And thank you for having me.
No. It's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for joining us. And I really wish you all the very best with all the wonderful work you're doing.
No, likewise. Thank you.